in general, in the long game, if you take care of and develop your people to be the best they can be, there will be larger rewards. That is not always true in any given quarter.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm Soapyrao and you are most welcome. So, what do I have in store for today's episode? I've got a lovely guest lined up after my few words of wisdom. There's something now which we hear a lot about, which is literacy, and not in the sense that you might think, because while there is all this thing being spout out about financial literacy, it seems like a population that's already literate is getting more literate about a certain thing. And if you're on YouTube and you're looking at ads, possibly before this video, which I hope not, you probably would have got these guys going, is ChatGPT taking your job? Or are you sitting in front of this apartment block looking back and wondering how to get your dream home? It's crazy how much fear and anxiety these people put into, like, oh, you know what, if you are doing all the things at your job, you're doing something. I mean, fuck these guys, right? I know I've spoken about these YouTube ad guys before, the guys who tell you how to get rich quick, or to use a certain tool. All these weird kind of guys, first of all, who you wouldn't trust with, fuck your haircut. You wouldn't trust them even with, getting onto the footpath next to you. But suddenly now these guys are going to tell you how to get, whatever they're preaching. But anyhow, this whole financial literacy thing is, I don't know if it's bogus, but it's one of those things which is a trend that everyone seems to be telling you how that they were in the shithole, but suddenly they saw the light, and now they have the wherewithal to teach you how to make money, to be more responsible about money. And suddenly there's this whole generation of people who are responsible with money. I remember when I was in my 20s and money was not abundant, but at the same time it wasn't something that I was told about all the time, and it was one of those things which I wasn't reminded about, how I have not so much as the person next to me, how I need to be wise and start investing, and if I start compounding at the age of 20, by the age I'm 60, I can retire. Well, I think we do have more information, of course, and more exchange of information and more access to information with all these various platforms that we are on all the time. And as a result, there's the dissemination of information. That's the entire reason I did this intro, to say the word dissemination. Now, that aside, there's a lot more people who can reach out to other people. Now, is that good? Absolutely. Is that bad? Absolutely. Now, why is it good? I think it's good because there is more access, as the word is empowerment. But the problem with that comes a whole lot of bullshit. For every one person who actually can help you, there are a lot of these other people who are just going out there trying to talk about stuff that they don't know and reel you in with some whole lot of bullshit. And that, of course, comes with, open access to information. But I don't know how good this is as a thought process, because while, I might have been extremely frivolous with spending, and I still am, but now, when I'm 40 and I'm thinking about my family, I'm thinking about providing for them, or at least having a safety net for them. I ask these questions, but it also comes from a context of being in this position after many years. But somewhere else where I read after the lockdown, a lot more people who had this mindset of saving and having investments and having all these plans for their future were like, fuck it, you know what, man? Everything that I expected and saved for didn't keep me in a safe place when the lockdown hit. I was out of a job. I was fucked. So why should I now be safe? Why should I plan for a safer future when I can just say, you know what, today is when I'm alive. Today is when I have everything that I do, and I have these dreams, and I'm going to go ahead and make it come true. Now, I've lived both lives. I've had the life where I was like, you know what, living from a maxed out credit card to waiting for my dad paying it off when I was in university. And the £100 that I got would go straight into booze, and I would be left with £2 for food. Fucking amazing, right? And what do you get for £2? Top ramen, brilliant. But then when you're hungover and you have top ramen on your lap, or cornflakes, or whatever you get for £2, you can smell the curry from the neighbor's house, or you can smell dog shit from the neighbor's house, which smells amazing, right? But I've been in that position to now a position of security where I'm debt free in some way. not earning because I'm taking a break from stand up, but I'm in a place where I can make decisions that aren't desperate. And I feel that's a nice place to be. Now, coming from both places, or having been in both places, or in one place now, having been in another in the past, I think the pressure of saving is too much. I think you need to be sensible and not spend all your money and have £2 or equivalent of £2 in your bank account where you can't really decide what you want to eat, because the power of choice when it comes to food is important. And in hindsight, I can say this, but then, when the £100 comes back in the account, did I make wiser decisions the next 10 times? No, I still was ending up at £2, sometimes even less, sometimes maybe a pound more, because the previous night I would have spent the balance of the £3 on some dog shit kebab or some chips with a lot of thing, which next morning is sitting next to your bed, all coagulated into this mess of regret. And you kind of need it because you're just regretting what you did and you're this close to being sick. Now, the other thing of being constantly pressurized into saving, or being told that you're being unwise or being unsafe about not saving 30% of your income, is also, I feel, too much for young people, man. You guys got too much shit. And I don't mean this as an old fuddy-duddy, right? Like sitting in my 40s talking down to you. But when you're in your 20s, you have an opportunity at this time right now where you're earning maybe 5 times, 10 times what people did even as early as 2004. And I think there's so many avenues to spend that money, right? Of course, now, if you think that spending is going to make you happy, you're fucking right, it does. But if that's the only reason you're making money is to kind of just get these things for status, then I don't know. That's another conversation for another time. But there needs to be an outlet where you can go with the power of money behind you as a tool to give you some sense of fulfillment for doing that job that you work fucking 40 hours a week for. So when you go out there, you want to buy those pair of shoes that you can because you have an extra 10K in your account or whatever your shoes cost, or you want to go buy that top because you know what, just because you fucking can, go ahead and do it, and don't always be stressed about these narratives that are being sold to you by fucking idiots on YouTube who think that they know it all and who think that making crores of rupees is the only way that they can be happy. Like, no, spend some, because if you spend some, you make some. And what do you make? You make experiences. You make a memory. Maybe sometimes you regret that memory, but you know what? Regrets will fucking give you stress if you want them to give you stress, because if you give them not too much importance, they go away. And there's something from experience I'm telling you, because if you hold on to regrets like how you hold on to money, it's going to weigh you down. So I'm not here to tell you any kind of advice about financial literacy. You, I think, are smart enough to figure out what you want. But all I'm here to say is when you make some money, man, treat yourself, spend it. Don't only try to save it and listen to people who think that, oh, my compounding, yeah, they have some sense. I'm sure there's books on it. I'm sure there's self-help books about money. I'm sure there are support groups about spending. All these things, and all those things are out there, but all those things can also stress you. So just chill once in a while. If you make some money, you want to splurge, take your friends out, get smashed, buy yourself something which you really want, or something that makes you feel good, look good, make you feel good about yourself, make you feel worthwhile about the job. If it's a shitty job, then even more so, buy yourself a pair of jeans, man. Do it, lady, whatever you may identify as. Enjoy. So that's my, I wouldn't say a few cents, but that's my little tip from experience, if that counts for anything. Well, let me talk about today's guest. Well, I've got Liz Kislik. She's a management consultant and an executive coach. Well, conflict is something we all experience. We experience it at the workplace, in our relationships, at home, with parents, with siblings. Now, is conflict good? Well, it can cause stress. It can cause unease. It can cause discomfort. It can cause a lot of tension in all kinds of situations. So today, I'm talking to Liz about conflict, about how to deflect conflict, how to work through conflict, and how to understand conflict, and a whole lot more. I'm sure you'll enjoy the conversation, and Liz has a lot of insight from her vast knowledge and experience in this field. So without further ado, here's Liz Kislik. Liz, if you're listening, thank you for joining me on the episode. And to all of you, appreciate it as always. Till next time, stay safe, stay happy. Goodbye. God bless. Take care of yourselves. Cheers. Lovely to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, Liz.
I'm so happy to be with you.
You mentioned something, we were just talking before we started recording, and I want to understand what your take on this is, because it's something I've been trying to do, and it's something I've been trying to process. But can you talk about the idea of letting go? Because you mentioned that briefly, and paused you over there because I wanted to get it on the episode. So could you give me your understanding and how you look at the idea of letting go?
So I think letting go is something, I guess if you're lucky, that happens naturally when you get to a point where hanging on tight isn't serving you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking before a little bit about our children,
Mm-hmm.
and I was expressing my gratitude that my kids have been my best teachers,
Mm-hmm.
not just in life, in my from my profession,
Mm-hmm.
because I've learned so much from them about how people operate, etc. And one of the things that became quite plain fairly early on was that, in fact, we have very little control, actual control. There is control that comes from greater physical strength. When you have a baby, you can put the baby under your arm and carry them away.
Yeah.
But once you lose that kind of physical control, there are other kinds of power, whether it's hierarchy or money or whatever gives you power. But in general, when you're dealing with humans, if you want things to go well, you have to understand that it's not all up to you.
Yeah.
You get to have your viewpoint and you can express it, and you can express it in multiple ways, multiple times. But then you have to let go in the sense that other people will do what other people will do. And you have to learn to either meet them or walk away from them, or whatever is necessary, I would hope, for your mutual good and also for your own good.
Which seems like such a important way to live life, right? Because the moment you hold on too tightly to anything, whether it's your value system, whether it's the way of life, whether it's your ideology, just to go beyond functioning, it also kind of becomes too much of an attachment for you, and as a result, you kind of become that particular thing, and as a result, you get upset, and you see this in today's day and age where everyone's offended, is too sensitive, everyone is unable to handle contrary ideologies or ideas or things that don't suit them, and as a result, they want to either cancel someone, or they want that person fired, or they want that person to leave their friend circle. Like on social media, if someone doesn't say something that suits you, you just kind of block them, or you cancel them, or you report them. And as a result, you mentioned that you do focus and you do help and you understand the human condition. So what is the present situation of the collective human condition in 2023?
Oh gosh, Sophie, that's such a big question. Okay. From my perspective, so what you started with is like the Buddhist concept of grasping.
Mm-hmm.
And if you cling too tightly to anything, it's almost as if you stop looking around you at what is actually there. You are holding on to your concept that existed at a moment in time, your perception, your belief.
Yes.
You might be right, but you might not be right.
Mm.
Very often, I'm fond of saying to my clients when, say one leader is having a conflict with another leader.
Yeah.
And one of them tells me the story. And I suggest to them that their perspective is accurate but incomplete.
Yeah.
It is only what they see and not what else is happening around them. And being able to let go of your narrow conception and recognize that there are other points of view, mm-hmm. and that you can take in other information yourself and change your own point of view, that gives you more flexibility and more freedom. Yeah. I really don't like the concept of canceling. Mm-hmm. The idea that you could pretend that some other person no longer exists in your world, mm-hmm. That just seems very challenging to me, because some of it is just pretending. That other
Right.
person is there, whether you're paying attention to them or not. I think I don't know if we are actually more sensitive. I think we have lost the practice of working things out.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I think by nature humans are sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
We all are wounded pretty easily. It takes practice to strengthen yourself so that you feel calm and centered and grounded, and you recognize that whatever is going on with those other people doesn't necessarily affect you at your core. There are different ways to handle it. Um, but the idea that you could just wipe out a person's being, they're there anyway.
Mm. Yeah, the thing is, when even any kind of interaction, human relationship you have from your immediate family, your extended family, your close friends, your old friends, your new friends, sometimes there's this, inevitable thought process or the cycle of thinking that spirals out. And if it's negative, you kind of just, you can't stop those thoughts, right? It just goes. And many times it's not real. You just kind of build these scenarios. You anticipate that I'll say this, they'll say this. But that isn't the reality, because many times that doesn't even come to fruition, right? You just build all these thoughts in your head, and that's just your perception of someone else's reality, because they might have their own story, they might have their own way of thinking. And um, sadly, sometimes what happens is that when you're online, it's so easy to kind of, give voice to these thoughts and find people to agree with you, and kind of then make you feel like, what, I am right, I am the person who's the victim, I am the person. And sadly, it doesn't give you an opportunity to work through this narrow way of looking at the world, or narrow way of um, looking at other people. And you always are can find a shoulder to sob on, and that makes it harder, right? It makes, I wouldn't say resilience harder, but it makes the opportunity to work through the situation. Because many times I have this thought, and I'm like, okay, this person might do this, and I try to remind myself, what, or I rather talk to people like, this, as you just said, it's one part of the story. They might be doing something else. They might not even be thinking about you. So remember that it might be your way of looking at the situation and putting your insecurities, your fears onto that person. You're projecting it on that person. And after a little bit of work, after a little bit of thinking about it, after a little bit of distancing myself from the situation, I'm like, you know what? That was unnecessary. It kind of just gave your mind fodder to spiral out of control and arrive at this conclusion, when that's really not the reality. But I think it's harder for people now to work through that, because of what I just said a few minutes back.
You know what I wonder?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if what you're really putting together is the idea that more of us maybe suffer is the correct word from a kind of anxiety
Mm-hmm.
of the overthinking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say this, they're going to say that, this is what's going to happen. We frighten ourselves about everything that could go wrong. That's not everybody. Not everybody does that.
Mm-hmm.
But those of us who do it, we do it all the time, right?
Yeah.
And you hear the chatter in your head. Um, and I'm old enough that I had lots of social life before social media.
Yeah.
You could always find people, if you had friends, you could always find people who would take your point of view, tell you the other person was wrong and that you were the victim,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
was part of being in relationship with people. Most people you're in relationship with want to support you. So they kind of agree with you. Whether they agree with you or not, they don't think about it that deeply. They support you.
Yeah.
So you could always get backing for your point of view.
Mm-hmm.
What happens now online is, I think, two things. One is, maybe three. One is speed.
Yeah.
It happens so quickly. You don't even have to call someone on the phone, wait for the phone to ring. I, you know, um, I'm thinking of so many conversations where you're waiting for the phone to ring, and that's where you're thinking again, oh, what am I going to say? And do I really want to say this thing? You
Yeah.
almost have an extra moment to reflect
Hmm.
and think better of what might have been a precipitous action.
Yeah.
Um, so it's too fast in the first place. And there are too many people potentially able to correspond with you all
Mm.
at once. Um, and you don't actually know most of them. And we do think differently about people we don't really know.
Mm.
We're less careful with strangers in many ways. We ignore them more. So it makes sense just structurally that it would be easier to commit a kind of negative behavior in today's environment.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's because people actually want to be negative or think of themselves as negative.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, you know the old expression, get a life?
Yeah.
In a weird way, it's just too easy. The tools are too seductive. They are meant to be addictive. And so people can get caught up if they don't have enough other stuff going on.
Yeah.
Because somebody who would spew negativity 20 years ago, a dozen people heard it,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? And now there's just this multiplier effect. I think, and I'm sure it's because I'm old enough to have come from the before times, but I try not to behave any differently in social media than I ever behaved in the rest of my life. I
Mm.
choose who I speak to. I try to broadcast positive or helpful messages generally, the same as I would in regular life. And if I have something negative to say, my watchword from when I was a very young working person, I don't know who I heard this from, got this advice from, but somewhere I picked up the idea, would you want this thing you did or said to be on the front page of the New York Times?
Yeah.
And that has been such a good guide for me. So I haven't experienced the kind of victimization you talk about, even on social media, although I do know it exists.
Yeah. No, and that's such an important thing, right? Because when you feel, because in one way there is this compulsion that you have to perform for the world, you have to live for the world, you have to show, put your strongest foot forward and show the highlights in your life, um, and at the same time, words like vulnerability and authenticity are being bandied around, like the hashtags that are so important. But I can't really believe that that can really exist when you're only kind of showing your the strengths all the time, or showing your achievements or your success stories all the time. But what you said is, while that is being done on one side, it seems like the responsibility of to yourself, because when you meet a person, whoever it may be, right, meet a colleague at work, and meet a friend, or meet a new person, there is this kind of interaction guidelines for interaction, or there's this ethic which is, you do watch what you say, because there are consequences to your actions, to your words. So it kind of seems contradictory, right? One side, you are performing for all these strangers to impress them, yet there's no responsibility. You can say whatever. You can attract people by saying hate. You can attract people by saying negative things. You can attract people by saying lies. And on the other side, in the real world, or offline, you have this. At least I totally agree with you, because even I kind of watch what I say. Of course, sometimes you go overboard when in certain situations, when you lose control. But for the most part, there is this, I wouldn't say filter, but there's this internal mechanism that kind of guides the way you meet and talk and interact with people. So yeah, I don't have a question, but I'm just trying to understand that it's quite baffling, right?
It just seems extremely human to me.
Mm.
We want to look our best to others.
Yeah.
In general, we don't, most of us, maybe I shouldn't say that, but classically, we don't like to show our shadow side. We're kind of afraid of that.
Yeah.
We try to compartmentalize it or not confront it so much. Um, you're right about the artificiality of social media as a platform. I think that's an ongoing tension in the same way that public relations always had that ongoing tension, or even um, having a resume.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is best foot forward because think of people going on a first date. You're not going to tell the first date all your odd eccentricities and the things that are really important to you necessarily because you want to see what they're like. And it's going to take a few rounds before you really know
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
each other is like. And you let down your guard a little and you relax and you feel more comfortable, or you decide it's not for you.
Mm.
My feeling about authenticity and vulnerability is we are who we are and the truth comes out. I really believe that.
Yeah.
It
There's
may
only
not
yeah.
in the very first interaction, although sometimes you know, you talk to a person and you just get the sense of whether they would be good for you or not. And you might be wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're wrong. But um, if I present inauthentically on social media, then when someone gets in touch with me to see about my working with them, they're going to be disappointed
Mm.
and they won't want to hire me. And the reason I'm on social media is for business purposes. I wouldn't be on there for my regular human connection. I do that in other ways.
Yeah.
Um, so I actually feel like I can't afford, I can be nicely dressed. I'm wearing a scarf now. I wear a scarf almost every day. It's part of my it's just how I dress. It's part of my persona.
Mm.
So it's meant to look nice, but it's not fake. I actually wear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
And that's what
I,
I find that, sorry for interrupting.
no, good,
Um,
please.
no, because we have this whole um, generation of advertising which is going through individuals promote, and you mentioned the scarf thing, and I think I just wanted to talk about the appearance, right? Because you have individuals called influencers, and influencers, of course, influencing people. And I find it, I wouldn't say inauthentic, but I find it quite crazy how, um, I'm, again, I think advertising in itself is selling a certain story. I don't know if it's a true or but an aspirational story. But when you have an individual who's being approached by 15, 20 brands, and they're all different, right? I get it. There are some who are doing really, really good work with spreading the message of whatever it may be, with better lifestyle, better food, better fitness. But for every one of those or 10 of those, there may be 100 or 1,000 others who are, one day they're selling, supplements. The next day they're selling, the best blender on Amazon, or the next day they're selling something. So the thing is, they might not even, like, you wear the scarf because that's part of what you chosen to kind of display your image, your comfort level, and that's what you're confident about. But I don't think everyone can. They're not able to do that because they jump at any brand that comes at them because they want to. It's kind of become this rush to kind of get everything quickly. And as you said, speed. It's all about getting popular quickly. It's about getting rich quickly. But how does that, from a business point of view, how does someone like that sustain that model for years? Because you hear about it for 6 months, then that person's gone. Now, 3 months, another person comes up. So it's very replaceable, these influencers, because there are some of those who've really been around for years. I mean, this entire digital era is about 22 years old, so it's not that long a time that we're talking about. But you have some people who withstood that sort of 20-year period. But then you hear about people who are big for 6 months, then they're nowhere because one is someone else has replaced them, or two, they've had some mental health breakdown and they can't cope with that popularity. So, so how does someone like you who spent so many years in the space of looking at businesses look at this model of the influencer?
In a way, you answered your own question.
Oh, damn it. Me and my wordiness.
because because um, everybody's looking to make a living,
Hmm.
and everybody's entitled to do that.
Hmm.
If people are too shallow, too surface, willing to take anyone's money,
Hmm.
and don't have a solid core of expertise, consistency, they do often flare out.
Hmm.
They might be okay for a while, and then they might learn a sturdier kind of path. I mean, speaking as a consultant, it's always been true that there were people who said they were consultants with very little background.
Yeah.
Some of them matured into knowing what they were doing.
Yeah.
We all start out at the beginning, you know? So there are a lot of different ways to progress. If you take any kind of business from anybody, your reputation may not be as good, exactly to your point, as someone who's more consistent and has a clear mission or set of values.
Hmm.
So when the market is working well, it recognizes that difference pretty quickly.
Hmm.
If there is, bad faith kind of stuff, I mean, this is why here in the States, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, has all kinds of rules. You have to declare, in effect, that you're an influencer. You're supposed to say that you've received these products. Not
Hmm.
everybody follows the rules, of course, but there are actual governmental structures to try to make sure that people aren't being conned.
Right.
So sometimes the market knows it's on its own. Sometimes government has to step in to protect us if we can't tell. In general, though,
Hmm.
if I can tell somebody's a phony, why would I listen to them?
Right.
So, exactly to your point, if you feel suspicious about somebody who seems, it's vitamins one day and blenders the next, and maybe they're really just talking about health, but maybe what they're talking about makes no sense, then the smart thing is to not pay attention.
Mm.
It doesn't mean you have to take them on,
Right.
but why
Yeah.
waste your time?
True. But you have a lot of shift happening in the space of business, and a lot of opportunities, which are great with the digital space. And even where I live in Bangalore, it suddenly now seems like everyone is now got a startup, and they just got startup ideas. It's seed funding. The talk is just money, money, money. Making pitch decks, making elevator pitches. It's never ending, right? But what I'm trying to understand is, as you said, a good idea will eventually stand the test of time, and it, of course, with the right kind of inputs, with the right kind of team, it will grow. But sometimes a lot of the ideas aren't picked up because of whatever the reason, right? It might get swamped by by all the noise on the internet. Like I was talking to a professor of psychology from Virginia Tech, and he said, he's been in it for 50 years, but sometimes he's worried that the message, the research that he's done doesn't get out because of pop psychologists on social media who give you 3 rules to feel happy in 3 minutes, or 10 ways to get rich in 10 minutes. And it seems like that's what people want. They want the quick fix. So when you apply that to a business, someone starting a business, someone who's struggling with the business, how do you put it in perspective? Because they might say, you know what, I'm just not, the algorithms aren't favorable to my online business, maybe my e-commerce business, maybe the product I'm trying to promote online. Because at the end of the day, the footprint you have online does help you grow your business. So how do you approach that?
You sure know how to load up a question.
I think I just talk too much. I don't think it's loading up
No,
intentionally.
I think you have a lot of ideas at the same time. I'm going to try to parse this out.
Right.
So, one thing at the beginning of your idea of this question
Mm-hmm.
had to do with some good ideas don't get heard.
Mm-hmm.
There's too much noise. And that's where some promotion is important.
Right.
And promotion. So I think there are people who are perhaps instinctively promotional, self-promotional, and people who are less so, perhaps. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's a fair binary, but let's use it. I am mindful of something Marshall Goldsmith said. Do you know who he is? He's like the number one leadership coach in the universe.
Okay.
Um, Very famous book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There,
Mm.
and a very practical thinker about how executives should function for their good and for the good of their organizations.
Mm.
And one of the things he said, if you have concerns about the phoniness of self-promotion and the noise and all these things, he asked, is the world better off or worse off if they hear about you and come to get your help?
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe in what you're doing, of course you think the world is better off.
Yeah.
Well, if you want them to find you, you have to put up a signpost, which in this world is at least as much digital as it is,
Yeah.
concrete. So the need for intelligent promotion is there. So your professor that you spoke with
Mm-hmm.
may need support getting his ideas out if he's not personally skillful at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
The issue of startup and how do you get going and how long it takes. So when I work with clients, I'm very clear that nothing strong happens overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Big successes, there are very few overnight successes. They are overnight successes after 15 years in development struggling.
Right.
It looks overnight because we don't see the struggle.
Mm.
Humans have always wanted quick fixes. That's why we prefer a pill to exercise. Right? It's how we are. If there's a way to do it fast, we want it. And so many people will try fast things first.
Yeah. 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 Very true.
But then if they want real success, they probably have to take a longer and slower path that involves experimentation and consistent practice and hard work. Hard work actually pays off if you are pointing yourself in the right direction.
Mm. That's important. Just kind of slogging at something which is, yeah, not going to work if it's not in the right direction. Yeah. No, because I find, no, thanks for answering that, because I did put out a lot of thoughts in my head in that particular statement. I wouldn't even say statement, that particular chapter. But, a lot of times, you kind of have these situations where you have social conditioning which has led you to believe in a certain way you think you should be, or what you should do, or how you should live. And then you might change as a person by experience, by life experience. You're like, you know what I was told in school or in college doesn't apply to me anymore. Yet there are two worlds you're trying to navigate: the way you were conditioned to believe and live and want and achieve, and this new way that you want fulfillment, or you want a different value system or a different way of living. So that leads to inner conflict. And how does someone in today's day and age, when it's rapid, it's fast, it's changing constantly, approach the inner conflict and resolve the inner conflict, or even begin to understand that there's inner conflict?
That's a beautiful question. Let me say first, I do not consider myself an authority on this, although, of course, I have opinions. I'm a big believer in therapy, that it is very helpful to work with a skillful person to help you learn what you really think,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes to get past some of that conditioning, to see what the opportunities are for you in the way to think about yourself and your life, and sometimes to connect up your thoughts about who you're supposed to be and your feelings about who you really are. But there are other ways to work on this. There are some people who read or journal. There are many different approaches.
Right.
The thing is that figuring out your life is the work of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you are open to the world and willing, I think you can keep working on that until you die
Mm-hmm.
because you have new experiences. I go back to our first conversation about children.
Mm-hmm.
The great thing about kids is they're always younger than you are. So they're always, right? So they're
Yeah.
always experiencing an earlier stage of your life. And one of the advantages of their lives, and one of the advantages that parents have that many non-parents don't, is seeing what your children are going through and how your children think helps you reflect again what you thought at their age, what you thought now, what worked for you then, what didn't work for you, what you want to share with them. I find it is a constant opportunity to revisit who and how I want to be.
That's lovely.
And
Yeah.
that's all good.
Yeah.
Um it can be painful. I don't mean to discount that because human beings are in many ways tribal creatures. We need groups to survive as our earliest ancestors did. And so if the reconsideration, as you described it, sometimes means that you are rejecting some of your early conditioning or early programming, that can be painful if you have to separate yourself from family or community, if you have to explain that you have different thoughts, if people are no longer loving to you or accepting of you because you've expressed differences. That's hard.
Yeah.
And that's why it's very helpful to not only have your own thoughts, but whether it is a friend group or a counselor or the wisdom of the ages, you can work yourself through those things and come out better.
Yeah. No, that's. I really think that's, quite a lovely way of looking at the when you're looking at a child and you kind of put yourself there, because we so often don't do that. We kind of just stand at this place and project um, our reality and our perception on the kids' reality. While we spoke about this, right? If we an opportunity to unlearn and kind of say, you know what, let's go through that stage of their life and let me go through it on my own as well. So it's an amazing opportunity. But one thing I've realized is, what tends to happen when you kind of do go through the process that you just described with help or in whatever way you can do it, and you set on this path of understanding what makes you happy and who you are and what gives you fulfillment. There are these moments where you kind of go back into that other world and you wake up, oh, I slipped up. But it's so important not to be hard on yourself, because that way had such a grasp on you for so many years, and that's the way you looked at life. And I think reminding yourself, you know what, that this is a process, and as you said earlier, there's a process that is what life is. It's not that you have to do it like a deadline in 6 months and then move on to the next project. It's an and I just wanted to make that observation, because I catch myself doing that sometimes, going, oh man, you slipped up again. But you're like, yeah, slipped up at what? At living?
That's exactly right. What you are expressing in some ways is self-compassion,
Mm-hmm.
which is a crucial skill. And too many people don't have it. And really, speak so harshly to themselves in ways they would never speak to a loved one.
Yeah.
Once you beat yourself up, it's really hard to grow. That process of being harsh with yourself actually keeps you stuck, right?
Yeah.
Because then you frighten yourself. Um,
Hmm.
it's hard to move forward. But
Yeah.
recognizing that we are all imperfect, but we can keep trying anyway. You
Hmm.
see, I'm very hopeful about the human condition and that we can do better. And learning from our children, other people's children, there are expectations that younger generations have today. Of course, I think to a great extent in terms of workplace issues. Um, so sometimes that's annoying to older people. Why should these kids have an easy time? I didn't have an easy time. That kind of sentiment.
Yeah.
But if those kids are figuring out something that's better or smarter, isn't it to our advantage to learn from them, even if they are ahead of us? There is nothing wrong with somebody being ahead of you if you can learn from them and therefore get farther on your own path. The fact that someone is more successful or has more happiness or better work life balance or whatever it happens to be, if you can find somebody like that who you think is doing anything better than you are, it's a great advantage to watch them and figure out what you should try
Yeah.
rather than just thinking, oh, I'll never have that or they don't deserve that, which is something as humans we do all the time. Um, I really believe that unless somebody's a psychopath, we can all improve ourselves. So, whatever example is in front of our faces that we can take advantage of, that's a good thing. We may have to get over ourselves to do it, but recognizing it is actually a benefit.
Yeah. You know, I recently heard from a comedian I was talking to. He said a very nice, put this nicely. He said, one thing that's got me through all the years of doing stand up without feeling overwhelmed or feeling like I'm not being overtaken, he said that someone else's success is not my failure. And I think it captures what you just said, because there's such a tendency that when someone else does well, we feel like we haven't done well, or we want to bring them down, and that creates a lot of resentment. It creates a lot of this collective way of, you know what, that person must have done something, and why don't I deserve that? And it just doesn't serve. And I can vouch for that way of thinking, because I've been in moments where I'm like, just, it creates so much internal anger, frustration, and who gets hurt at the end of the day? You, no one else. That person's doing their thing, you know.
Yes, um, the last thing you said is exactly right. Those negative thoughts only hurt you, doesn't hurt the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a zero sum game. There are specific circumstances that are.
Mm-hmm.
I think stand up must be so incredibly hard to do. I don't know how people put themselves through it, but there are times when somebody else will get the gig and you won't.
Yeah.
And at that time, you didn't get it. And
Yeah.
that feels bad. But that doesn't mean you'll never get it or that you won't get the one that's right for you. Everybody's disappointed a whole bunch.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like that person, everything is perfect in that other comedian's life all the time, no problems.
Yeah.
We all have the same kinds of challenges, not necessarily at the same moment. There is the potential for more success for everybody. It's not a zero sum game. It is hard to see that in the moment. But for many people, that kind of challenge would be a spur. Okay, I call it leapfrogging. I'm going to get ahead of that guy. I don't
Yeah.
have to hate him. I just have to think, wow, he's doing so well. How could I do even better? And make my own plan.
Mm. That's nice, because I think recognizing that in the moment is hard, but it's important. But Liz, you speak about conflict at the workplace. I just want to address a few things in that space. Um, we hear a lot about, especially as a consultant and as a person who helps businesses and people, there's a lot of this goal setting, recognizing where you want to be in some time, in some years. And even with individuals, there's this, becoming a better version, setting goals, gaining skills. And it's a great thing, I think. And you've addressed that in some way, that you can have your own plan, and recognizing that different people have different challenges and opportunities come at different times. But I want to understand, when you have an organization full of people like this, who have aspirations, who have dreams, and there is a hierarchy, there is a structure, there is a lot of elements which are beyond just the human resource and the human condition. How does this way of, improving performance, gaining skills, without, not without, but with the context of competition, how does that play to conflict, and how does someone like you approach a situation when there's an organization, with any organization, because I don't think it's specific to one or two.
Okay, that's a very big question. So the first thing I want to say is there is no easy answer to that question. There is no 3-point plan that's going to resolve that inherent tension.
Yeah.
You have to come at it from multiple approaches or vectors at once. And this is part of why leadership is so much harder than it looks like it would be.
Yeah.
In situations like that, it is very helpful to recognize the strengths and capabilities of every person on your team. Mm-hmm. Really know them well. I want to say that as a baseline for everything, because if you don't know the people, it's hard to help them do their best for your organization, whatever kind it is, whether you're running, a huge Fortune 100 company or the corner store. Knowing what they're good at and where they need to grow, that's like table stakes. Figuring out how to help them be and do their best is the next thing. And that's even harder.
Yeah.
It's really hard, this stuff. Thank goodness, because that's how I make my living.
Yeah.
And part of why it's hard, it's everything we talked about. People look for a quick answer. Mm-hmm. So I will promote the person who sells the most, or who makes the most widgets, or it's a quantitative assessment, and that's all I look at.
Okay.
So that might be one way to go, but not all the widgets might be of the same quality. Or sometimes people make sales, but their customers aren't as happy as a different salesperson who says, "Oh, I understand you're not ready today, but I'll come back in 3 months when you are ready."
Yeah.
And we consummate the deal then. So there are loads of factors going on. In general, as we talked before, if you have a good business proposition, if you are offering something the marketplace wants, if you figure that out, and you have lots of talented, truly good people, it's true they may feel a little competitive, but helping them all get better helps grow your business. And it may be that there isn't room for all of them. Mm-hmm. You can't afford to pay all of them the extra money you'd like to give them.
Yeah.
And so some of them may choose appropriately to go work somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And that can be equally good, because maybe they go to one of your suppliers and you have a fantastic relationship then forever after with that supplier. Yeah. Or they go and learn other skills in some other organization and then come back to you when they're at a higher level to fill a special job you've just opened. In general, in the long game, if you take care of and develop your people to be the best they can be, there will be larger rewards. That is not always true in any given quarter. In any given quarter, some people will be happier than other people, and one person may leave, and one person may feel you're treating them unfairly. And this is why you have to really know them well and understand what would be good for them. And sometimes the best thing for them is to say, I can't afford to give you what you deserve.
Mm.
And you actually help them find a better job somewhere else. Well, that's good, because who wouldn't want to come and work for you if that's the kind of leader you are?
Yeah.
So it becomes this sort of self-reinforcing universe of how you deal with people.
Yeah. And again, it's that concept of letting go, right? And yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
I read over the past year or three these episodes where, I'm going to give it more in the space that I'm familiar with. Like, there were walkouts in companies because, say, at Netflix, the employees didn't agree with the content the company was commissioning, or at Spotify because of some of the shows which were, in their opinion, not putting out the truth. So how does a person deal with that? Because is it a moral issue? Because it's clearly not a business issue, right?
I think moral issues and business issues have more intersection, more overlap than we often think about. If people feel strongly that I am being asked to take an action or to work in a place that violates my values, and therefore I want to leave, good for that person who wants to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I think they are expressing the kind of authenticity you talked about before.
Yeah.
I think that's all to the good for them. And it is their right to try to find a place that suits them better. I hope they are careful that they are paying their bills at the same time.
Yeah.
But I agree that you should not work in a place that violates your values. And taking this from a slightly different perspective, sometimes there are people who complain about the business they work for.
Oh, yeah.
And I say,
yeah.
Why do you stay? If you hate it so much, it's not healthy.
I know people like that.
Find someplace, right? A lot of people like that.
I hate my job. I hate my job. I'm like, why are you there? Oh no,
right.
I'm not ready to quit. I need money. I'm like, how do you talk to someone like that? Because it's in today's, okay, as you said, it's very important to recognize that you need money to live in this world, and you have needs. You have a certain lifestyle that you've gotten used to. Let's keep that as the baseline. But with the number of opportunities that exist out there, of course, there are more people for the same job, but there are ways in which things. So why do people stay in these jobs? I mean, because yes, as you said, get out of that job. But clearly, there are a lot of people who don't want to get out of that job, but it's just a narrative that they got used to.
Yes. So, we have a lot of inertia. We have a lot of fear. We have a lot of inertia. We have a lot of comfort with the lack of risk and discomfort with the possibility of risk.
Mm-hmm.
People also stay in bad marriages.
Yeah.
People stay in homes or keep cars that break down. Like, we do all kinds of things that in the big picture don't make that much sense. But in the day-to-day, we feel we're choosing the lower risk choice.
Yeah.
So when somebody hates their job all the time, just as you said, I talk to them about, why do you stay? What do you see as the value here? What are the specific parts that you hate? Where can you make a difference? First, conceptually, because it's best to start with ideas that are a little distant from us and not too terrifying. If we get too scared, then we can't think. So making sure that a person doesn't feel like I'm telling them they have to leave. They should just think about what would be better for them. Could it be better here? if you went and negotiated with your boss, if you had somebody facilitate the conflict you have with your peer in this other department, could it just get better if you worked at it in a different way?
Yeah.
So that's the first kind of thing. But the second thing is if they really feel it can't get better, take the opportunity to look at your life. How could you have a better life with a job that you cared more for? What could you consider? And then how do you go through the process of looking for another job? A lot of people don't actually know what to do. And so they need somebody to explain. Sometimes people really are stuck
Yeah.
because they have certain financial requirements, they have kids to feed, they have rent to pay, whatever it is, and they do not see a way out at the current time.
Yeah.
And if that is the case, then it's important to try to help them shift from, I hate this job, to, I appreciate this job because it lets me feed my kids. I hate this task that is really uncomfortable for me. Thank goodness I only have to do it once a day. Or I really dislike this colleague and I don't know if I can ever like them better, but I can respect the fact that in their realm, the work they do is appreciated.
Mm.
Shifting your perspective can help you live with things. But having said all that, if you actually believe that there are moral or ethical violations, if you are subject to bullying, for example, find a way to get out. Do not make yourself unsafe going to work every day. We're at work more than we're at the rest of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a terrible equation.
Mm. Yeah, I find that, when of course, you mentioned all the considerations. Some people just have to work for various reasons, for various obligations and responsibilities. But, it's such an interesting thing that considering we spend 60, 80, I don't know how many hours a week, that we don't look at it as a life decision. We look at it as a monetary decision or a skill decision, right? And I find that interesting because there are so many other factors that can compensate for maybe not getting the right salary or getting the right position. But if there are other things, like if it's fun to go to work, there are fun people, or, well, you know what, the commute is good, I can, or so are those some things that you should consider as well, and not just the position or the company or the pay package?
You kind of have answered your own question again, because yes.
I should do an episode with myself.
Of course. I mean, in my case, for example, I have worked with all kinds of organizations through my career.
Mm-hmm.
In the last few years, what I do the most of, because I love it and we seem to find each other and it really works. I work with a lot of family businesses and privately owned and operated businesses,
Mm-hmm.
and nonprofits that are also sort of non-corporate
Yeah.
in their nature. Because I found that working with large corporations, too much bureaucracy, all kinds of red tape, and sometimes more groupthink, all kinds of reasons, I prefer this kind.
Yeah.
This kind does not pay as much as the big tech companies, just
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine with me. I mean, I make enough money to have a good life. Don't get me wrong. I'm not worried about my rent. That's a different thing. I
Yeah.
have loads of privilege and I know it. But I have chosen what is fun to do. I don't want to be miserable.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah,
really
yeah,
strongly about that.
yeah.
The other thing I feel very strongly about is my independence.
Hmm.
When I don't like an organization's business practices, first of all, I actually tell them because I tell them they could do better if they would give up these practices that I don't care for, and I give them a business rationale for doing it. But that doesn't mean they're going to change. Of course, it's their right to keep doing the thing that I disapprove of.
Yeah,
So long as it's not illegal, they can do it,
yeah,
but I don't have to be there.
yeah.
So either I don't renew with them, or in very rare cases, I have actually said, this is what I have completed. Let's be done. Thank you very much. And I don't go back. Um, because it's important to me that I be able to do that. I don't want to feel trapped. So knowing what's important to you, we worry about money all the time. Almost everybody worries about money all the time, even when we have some. But knowing what's important to you so that you can have a good day, so long as your actual needs are handled, whatever that baseline is, there's a lot more choice than just about how much am I paid. There are
Mm.
many more things that can give us satisfaction. And also, I'm going to say this as somebody who has their own business, a sense of legacy and having created value and meaning in the world and not just, punched the clock and showed up every day dragging to do something unpleasant.
I liked your answer a lot better than mine, just in case people are wondering.
Yeah.
I want to ask you one thing. You've taken the time to share so many experiences and a lot of valuable tips and the way we can look at our experience and the situation we are in. Um, you've spent so many years. Can you hear me, Liz? Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, I
Yeah.
hear you fine.
You've spent so many years in this and now you help people. What has been that one skill and that one value that has helped you through all the things you've been through, the ups and downs, the good, the challenges, whatever it's been? It's been, I'm sure, a very interesting ride. But what is that one skill and that one value that you've found really, really helpful?
So, um, you sometimes ask complex questions, and I often give complex answers. I don't think I can limit myself to one thing.
That's fine. That's fine.
Um, okay, I'm going to say that there are really three things, thinking about it,
Hmm.
that keep me going even when times are difficult,
Hmm.
when I'm frustrated or struggling. One is I'm incredibly curious. I really want to know. I want to know why something works, doesn't work, how it came to be. I want to know. And I can want to know even when I feel terrible. So that's a motivating spark in a way.
Nice.
A second thing is I have confidence that I will figure something out. And I believe this is true for most people. There is always something you can do. Sometimes you have to wait or hold still for a minute and not act right away. But there is, if you're alive and nothing, there's no fire and no blood, there's almost always something you can do. And I have confidence that I will figure it out.
Mm.
And the third thing, and it took me more years to come to this, I really have a lot of compassion for how much people go through and what a hard time we give ourselves and that everybody has. And remembering that lets you not take things so personally lets you look for hope in a situation and figure out the thing you can do. Yeah, I think it's those three things. I'll stop there. I'm sure I could come up with more, but let's stop with that one.
That's beautiful. Because yeah, the third one, it's yeah, it takes time.
Yes, it took me longer.
Yeah, yeah. Liz, it's been a pleasure, and sorry if I interviewed myself at moments in the podcast, but it was really really insightful, and really really appreciate you spending time guiding me through some of the things which I find confusing, and I think people listening as well will really appreciate. And a lot of people are looking for fulfillment. A lot of people are looking for joy. A lot of people are confused about how to go about it, and I'm sure what you've said has really helped them. So thank you, and yeah, appreciate it.
Soapy, I really enjoyed this conversation so much because we talked about deep things and it was also very fun.
Thank you. That means a lot, because as I said at the beginning before we recorded, it's for me, I'm curious as well, and these conversations help me kind of get different people with different experiences sharing their point of view, and helps me sometimes dispel certain myths or certain ideas that I think are right, or that I think that people should be in a certain way. And a lot of the things you said today went a long way at adding to my the way I look at the world. So I really thank you for that.
Thank you. That's very meaningful to me.
Thanks.